Maya sat at her kitchen table, watching the steam rise from her untouched coffee cup. The apartment felt too quiet, like even the walls were holding their breath. She'd been living alone for 6 months now, but the silence still caught her off guard sometimes. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet you enjoy after a long day. This was the heavy, empty kind that made her chest feel tight. She picked up her phone and scrolled through social media without really seeing anything. Happy couples on vacation, friends at dinner parties, families celebrating birthdays. Everyone else seemed to be living in full color while her world had turned gray. She put the phone down and stared at the coffee again. It was getting cold. Just like everything else in her life lately, the breakup hadn't been dramatic. No big fights or betrayals. Just two people who slowly drifted apart like boats losing their anchor. They tried couples therapy, date nights, even a weekend getaway. But nothing could bring back that spark they'd once shared. When they finally decided to end things, it felt more like admitting defeat than making a choice. Maya thought she'd feel relieved afterward, free to make her own decisions, to come and go as she pleased, to rediscover who she was outside of a relationship. But freedom felt a lot like loneliness, and she wasn't sure she liked it. Her sister kept calling, asking if she wanted to go out, meet new people, try new things. Maya always said maybe next time, but next time never came. Work had become her escape. She stayed late at the design studio, taking on extra projects, volunteering for overtime. Her colleagues probably thought she was incredibly dedicated, but the truth was simpler. She just didn't want to go home to that quiet apartment where her thoughts got too loud. At work, she could focus on color schemes and layouts, problems that had clear solutions. The worst part was how invisible she felt, not just to other people, but to herself. She'd catch glimpses of her reflection in store windows and wonder who that tired-looking woman was. When had her shoulders started slouching like that? When had she stopped wearing the bright scarves she used to love? When had she become someone who ordered takeout every night because cooking for one felt pointless? Her friends tried to help. They invited her to parties and set her up on blind dates. But Maya felt like she was watching life happen through glass. Like she was there, but not really present. She'd smile and nod and make the right conversation. But inside she felt hollow. How could she connect with someone new when she'd lost connection with herself? One particularly rough evening, Maya found herself standing in front of her bathroom mirror after a shower. Her hair was wet and messy, her face bare of makeup. She looked tired, older than her 34 years. But what scared her most was the emptiness in her own eyes. When had the light gone out? When had she stopped being curious about tomorrow? She remembered being different once. She used to wake up excited about small things, a new recipe to try, a book she wanted to read, a place she wanted to visit. She used to laugh easily, to dance while cooking dinner, to call friends just to share a funny story. That version of herself felt like a character from a movie she'd watched long ago. The apartment felt smaller every day. The walls seemed to be closing in, filled with reminders of her old life. Photos she hadn't taken down yet, furniture they bought together, a coffee maker that was too big for one person. She thought about moving, starting fresh somewhere new. But even that felt overwhelming. Where would she go? What would change besides the address? Maya's sister visited one weekend and found her still in pajamas at 2 in the afternoon. Instead of lecturing her or trying to cheer her up, she just sat on the couch and held her while Maya cried. It was the first time she'd really let herself feel the sadness instead of just pushing it away. The tears felt like they'd been building up for months, and once they started, they wouldn't stop. After her sister left, Maya sat in that same spot on the couch and made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this, waiting for life to happen to her. She didn't know what she wanted yet, but she knew what she didn't want. She didn't want to be the woman who disappeared into her own life. She didn't want to look back in 10 years and realize she'd wasted her time being afraid. That night, she cleaned her apartment for the first time in weeks. She threw away old takeout containers and washed the dishes that had been piling up. She opened the windows to let in fresh air and put on music while she worked. It wasn't a big change, but it felt like the first step toward becoming herself again. She still didn't know what came next. She still felt lonely and uncertain and scared. But for the first time in months, she also felt something else, a tiny spark of possibility. Maybe she didn't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe it was enough to just start asking the questions. 3 weeks later, Maya's coworker practically dragged her out of the office at 5 o'clock sharp. She'd been mentioning a pottery class for days, saying Maya needed to do something creative outside of work. Maya had been making excuses, but her friend wasn't taking no for an answer anymore. The community center was buzzing with activity when they arrived. There were kids taking swimming lessons, seniors playing cards, and teenagers practicing dance routines. Maya felt overwhelmed by all the energy and noise after months of quiet. But there was something comforting about being around people who were actually doing things, creating things, living their lives. The pottery studio was tucked away on the second floor. It smelled like earth and water, and the late afternoon sun streamed through tall windows, casting everything in warm golden light. Maya had never worked with clay before. Her hands felt clumsy and awkward as the instructor showed them basic techniques. Her first attempt at making a bowl looked more like a lopsided ashtray. But something magical happened as the weeks went by. Maya found herself looking forward to Tuesday evenings in a way she hadn't anticipated anything in months. There was something soothing about working with clay, about the way it responded to her touch, about creating something beautiful from nothing more than earth and water and patience. The other students were a mix of ages and backgrounds. There was a retired teacher who made elegant vases, a teenager who crafted tiny figurines, and a businessman who came straight from work still wearing his tie. Everyone was focused on their own projects, but there was a sense of community in the shared space and purpose. Maya started noticing details again. The way the light changed throughout the evening class, the satisfying sound of the pottery wheel spinning, the gentle scrape of tools against clay. Her senses, which had felt dulled for so long, were slowly coming back to life. She found herself paying attention to textures and colors in ways she hadn't since art school. One evening, her piece collapsed just as she was getting excited about how it was turning out. Maya felt tears of frustration welling up, and she was embarrassed to be so emotional over a simple pottery project. But before she could pack up and leave, someone appeared beside her workstation. It was a man she'd noticed in previous classes. He had kind eyes and patient hands, and he never seemed to get frustrated when his own projects didn't work out. He always cleaned up without being asked and helped other students reach supplies on high shelves. There was something calming about his presence. He handed her a damp sponge and smiled. His voice was gentle when he said that collapsed pieces were just part of learning, that even experienced potters had projects fall apart sometimes. He told her about a vase he'd been working on for weeks that had cracked in the kiln, and how disappointed he'd been. But then he'd learned to see the cracks as part of its story, its character. Maya found herself laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. Not polite social laughter, but real amusement at the idea of her lopsided bowl having character. She started over with fresh clay, and this time when it began to wobble, she didn't panic. She just adjusted her hands and kept going. After class, they walked out together, talking about the meditative quality of working with clay. Maya learned that his name was David, and that he'd started pottery classes after going through his own difficult time. He was an architect who designed office buildings, but he discovered that creating something with his hands helped balance all the computer work. In client meetings, they stopped for coffee at a little place near the community center. Maya was surprised to find herself actually enjoying the conversation. David asked thoughtful questions and listened to her answers. He didn't try to fix her problems or give advice. He just seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. When was the last time someone had been curious about her thoughts and opinions? Maya told him about her work as a graphic designer, about how she'd been feeling stuck lately, both creatively and personally. David shared that he'd gone through a period where everything felt gray and meaningless, where he questioned all his choices and wondered if he'd somehow taken a wrong turn. Without realizing it, as they talked, Maya felt something she'd almost forgotten existed: connection, not just attraction or compatibility, but that rare feeling of being understood by another person. David had a way of making her feel like her thoughts and feelings were valid, like she wasn't broken or behind in life, just human. When they parted ways that evening, Maya walked home with a lightness in her step that had been missing for months. She caught herself humming while she unlocked her apartment door, and the silence inside didn't feel quite so heavy. She made herself a proper dinner and ate it at the table instead of standing over the sink. Small changes, but they felt significant. The next morning, Maya woke up actually looking forward to something for the first time in ages. Not just pottery class, but the possibility of seeing David again, of continuing their conversation. She realized she'd been smiling while she brushed her teeth, and it startled her. When had she stopped smiling without thinking about it? When had happiness become something she had to work at, instead of something that just happened naturally? Over the next few months, Maya felt like she was slowly waking up from a long, dreamless sleep. What had started as coffee after pottery class became longer conversations, then weekend walks through the farmer's market, then lazy Sunday afternoons, browsing bookstores and art galleries. David had a way of seeing beauty in ordinary things that reminded Maya how much there was to appreciate in the world. He never pushed her to move faster than she was comfortable with. When Maya mentioned that she wasn't sure she was ready for anything serious, David simply said he enjoyed spending time with her, whatever that looked like. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people getting to know each other and seeing what developed naturally. Maya began to notice changes in herself that went beyond her growing feelings for David. She started wearing colors again instead of the safe blacks and grays she'd been hiding behind. She bought fresh flowers for her apartment, just because they made her smile. She called old friends she'd been avoiding, actually wanting to share her days instead of just getting through them. David made her laugh in ways that surprised her. When she attempted to cook dinner for him and burned the pasta, instead of being polite about it, he suggested they order pizza and eat it on her fire escape, counting stars and making up stories about the neighbors in the building across the street. When a sudden rainstorm caught them without an umbrella, he pulled her under a shop awning and they spent 20 minutes people watching and making up elaborate backstories for everyone who passed by. But it wasn't just the fun moments that drew Maya in. David had a way of being present during difficult times too. When Maya had a panic attack at a crowded restaurant, overwhelmed by noise and too many people, David didn't make a big deal about it. He quietly asked for the check, walked her outside, and sat with her on a bench until her breathing returned to normal. He didn't try to fix anything or tell her she was being silly. He just stayed with her until the moment passed. Maya found herself sharing things with David that she'd never told anyone. Her fear that she was somehow broken, that she'd never be able to love someone the way she was supposed to. Her worry that she was too old to start over, that everyone else had figured out life while she was still stumbling around in the dark. David listened without judgment, sharing his own fears and uncertainties in return. The more time they spent together, the more Maya began to trust not just David, but herself. Her instincts, which had felt so unreliable during her previous relationship, started to feel trustworthy again. When David suggested a weekend trip to visit an art festival in a nearby town, Maya's first impulse wasn't to find excuses or worry about all the things that could go wrong. She just said yes. That weekend became a turning point. They stayed in a cozy bed and breakfast, spent hours wandering through booths of handmade jewelry and paintings, and talked late into the night about their dreams and fears. Maya felt more like herself than she had in years. Not the version of herself she thought she should be, but who she actually was underneath all the doubt and fear. On the drive home, David reached over and took her hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it made Maya's heart race in the best possible way. She realized that what she felt for David wasn't just gratitude for helping her through a difficult time or relief at not being alone anymore. It was love, real and deep and different from anything she'd experienced before. But with that realization came fear. Maya had loved before, and it had ended in heartbreak and loneliness. What if she wasn't ready for this? What if she was being unfair to David by bringing all her emotional baggage into the relationship? What if she got hurt again, or worse, what if she hurt him? These fears kept Maya awake at night, even as her days became brighter and more meaningful. She would lie in bed analyzing every conversation, every moment of closeness, looking for signs that she was moving too fast or not fast enough, that she was expecting too much or not enough. The voice in her head that told her she wasn't good enough for happiness was getting louder, even as her actual life was getting better. The tension came to a head one evening when David brought her soup when she was sick with a cold. It was such a simple, caring gesture, but it overwhelmed Maya with emotion as David sat with her on the couch, rubbing her back while she cried. Maya realized that what they had wasn't just romance or companionship, it was partnership, the kind of deep friendship and support she'd always hoped to find but never quite believed existed. That night, Maya made a decision. She could keep letting fear make her choices, or she could choose to trust the love that was growing between them. She could keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, or she could enjoy the happiness she'd found. It wouldn't be easy, and there were no guarantees. But Maya realized that the risk of being hurt was worth the possibility of building something beautiful together. 8 months into their relationship, Maya thought she had found her rhythm with David. They had established routines and inside jokes, shared responsibilities, and comfortable silences. Maya felt more settled and happy than she had in years. Then her phone rang on a random Thursday afternoon, and everything shifted. It was her ex-partner on the line, the one she'd spent 3 years with before they drifted apart and decided to end things. The voice she'd once known better than her own now sounded strange and formal. There were apologies for calling out of the blue, explanations about getting her number from mutual friends, and then the words that made Maya's world tilt sideways. He wanted to try again. He'd been in therapy, working on himself, figuring out where things had gone wrong between them. He'd realized how much he'd taken her for granted, how he'd let work and stress and daily life get in the way of their connection. He was different now, he said, ready to be the partner he should have been before. He knew it was complicated, knew she'd probably moved on. But he had to ask, did they have a chance? Maya listened in stunned silence, her heart pounding. She loved this person once, had built a life with him, had grieved the loss of their relationship. For months, his voice brought back memories of their good times together. Lazy Sunday mornings and shared dreams, inside jokes and comfortable intimacy. For a moment, she could almost imagine stepping back into that familiar life. But then she thought about David, probably at his office designing buildings and looking forward to their dinner plans. She thought about the person she'd become over the past year, the confidence she'd gained, the joy she'd rediscovered. The woman who'd answered this phone call wasn't the same person who'd sadly packed boxes and divided up furniture 8 months ago. Maya told her ex she needed time to think, that she couldn't make such a big decision on the spot. She promised to call him back in a few days after she'd had a chance to process everything. The conversation ended awkwardly, with both of them uncertain about what came next. That evening, Maya sat across from David at their favorite restaurant, picking at her food and struggling to find the right words. She'd never kept secrets from him, and the weight of the phone call felt heavy between them. Finally, she took a deep breath and told him everything about her ex's call, about his desire to reconcile, about her own confusion and uncertainty. David listened quietly, his face carefully neutral. Maya watched for signs of anger or jealousy, but instead she saw something that took her breath away: understanding, compassion, and underneath it all, a quiet sadness that he was trying to hide for her sake. When she finished talking, David reached across the table and took her hand. His voice was steady when he spoke, but Maya could hear the cost of his words. He told her that he wanted her to be happy, whatever that looked like. If she needed to explore the possibility of reconciliation with her ex, he would understand. It would hurt, but he would rather she make that choice freely than stay with him out of obligation or fear. Maya felt tears building in her eyes. The generosity of David's response, his willingness to put her happiness above his own feelings, made her love him even more, but it also made everything more complicated. How could she even consider leaving someone who loved her so unselfishly? Over the next few days, Maya felt like she was living into different timelines. In one, she was going through her normal routine with David, enjoying their easy partnership and deep connection. In the other, she was imagining what it would be like to rebuild something with her ex, to give their love story a second chance. She talked to her sister, her therapist, her closest friends. Everyone had opinions, but ultimately Maya knew the decision had to be hers alone. She agreed to meet her ex for coffee, to see if the person he claimed to have become was real, to understand what he was actually offering. Sitting across from him in the coffee shop where they'd had their first date years ago, Maya studied the face she'd once known so well. He did seem different, more thoughtful and present than she remembered. He talked about the therapy he'd been doing, the patterns he'd recognized in himself, the changes he made. His words sounded sincere, and Maya could see real regret in his eyes. But as he talked about their past and their potential future, Maya realized something profound. She wasn't the same person who had loved him before. The woman who had slowly disappeared in their relationship, who had lost herself in trying to make things work, no longer existed. The person sitting in this coffee shop had been reborn through her own healing. And through David's love, Maya could forgive her ex for the ways their relationship had failed. She could even appreciate the courage it had taken for him to reach out and apologize. But she couldn't go back to being someone she'd outgrown. The love they'd shared had been real, but it belonged to a different version of herself, one who had needed different things and accepted less than she deserved. The conversation was gentle but final. Maya thanked her ex for the good years they'd shared, acknowledged the pain they'd both experienced when things fell apart, and wished him genuine happiness with someone who could love the person he was becoming. But she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that person wasn't her. Walking back to her car after the coffee meeting, Maya felt lighter than she had in days. The choice hadn't been as difficult as she'd expected once she'd really looked at both options clearly. She wasn't choosing between two different men. She was choosing between two different versions of herself, and she liked who she'd become too much to go backward. Maya found David in his small backyard garden, kneeling between the tomato plants they'd planted together earlier that spring. The evening light was soft and golden, and he looked up when he heard her car door close. His face was carefully hopeful but guarded, and Maya realized how much courage it had taken for him to give her the space to make this choice freely. She walked across the grass slowly, taking in the man who had helped her remember who she was meant to be. He loved her back to life without trying to change her, had supported her dreams without making them about himself, had shown her what it felt like to be truly seen and accepted by another person. When she reached him, Maya knelt down beside him in the dirt, not caring about her work clothes. She took his hands in hers, noticing the soil under his fingernails, the calluses from weekend projects, the gentle strength that had steadied her through so many moments of doubt. She told him about the coffee meeting, about seeing her ex again, about the realization that had crystallized as she sat across from someone who belonged to her past. David listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving her face, hope and fear warring in his expression. Maya's voice was steady but emotional when she finally got to the heart of what she wanted to say. She'd spent years in her previous relationship trying to feel something she thought she should feel, trying to be someone she thought she should be. With David, she didn't have to try to be anything other than herself. The love between them wasn't work, it was recognition. It wasn't settling, it was coming home. She paused, looking into David's eyes, which were bright with tears of relief and joy. When she spoke again, her voice broke slightly with the weight of emotion and certainty combined. "I want to feel that again," she said, her eyes shining, with tears that had nothing to do with sadness. Your love every day, for as long as you'll have me. Not because it's easy or convenient or expected, but because it's real. Because with you, I'm not trying to be someone else's version of who I should be. I'm just me. And that's enough. David pulled her close then, and Maya could feel his relief and love in the way he held her, protective and grateful at the same time. They stayed like that as the sun set behind them, surrounded by the garden they'd tended together, planning a future that felt as natural and necessary as the changing seasons. Maya realized that her love story wasn't about finding someone to complete her or fix her problems. It was about finding someone who could walk alongside her as she became the person she was meant to be. It was about the courage to choose love even after being hurt, to trust again even after disappointment, to believe that she deserved happiness even when fear told her otherwise. 2 years later, at their small wedding ceremony in David's backyard garden, Maya would look back on this moment as the night she truly came home, not to a place, but to herself, and to a love that had taught her the difference between surviving and thriving. She'd learned that second chances weren't just about getting another opportunity, but about being brave enough to take it when it came, standing among their friends and family, surrounded by the flowers and vegetables they'd grown together. Maya knew that their love story was just beginning. They both brought broken pieces from their past relationships, their individual struggles, their fears about the future. But together, they created something beautiful and strong, something that honored where they'd been while embracing where they were going. The woman who had sat alone in that quiet apartment, wondering if she'd ever feel alive again, seemed like a character from another story now, not because Maya had forgotten her pain or pretended it hadn't been real, but because she'd learned that endings could also be beginnings, that sometimes you had to lose yourself completely before you could find who you were meant to be. As David slipped the ring onto her finger, Maya smiled through happy tears, knowing that they'd both chosen this love freely, fully, and forever. They'd learned that the best relationships weren't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone willing to grow and heal and build something beautiful together, one day at a time.